Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this session as you learn and discover new strategies to help you become more effective educators. We have leading this session Hope Derry and Christy Smith, two of Bladen County's finest beginning teachers. These two ladies were specially selected to join us today as they have exhibited exceptional success in collaborating with each other and communicating with parents in our English language learning communities. As a team, their students have made great progress, and today they are excited to share some of these successful and proven strategies with you all.
Thank you, Ms. Brewington. My name is Hope, and I'm going to open our presentation. Are you able to see my screen?
We are.
Right, so Mrs. Smith and I work together at an elementary school in Bladen County, and working with ELL, English language learners, or migrant students can be kind of tricky, and it takes strategy and a lot of flexibility. So hopefully this presentation will give you some good ideas and our best practices for you to implement in your own classroom. So we're gonna start off with a poll. What is your experience working with English language learners? And I'll just have you go ahead and click on that link, and I'm going to hit present, and you are able to view the responses.
And the link is in the chat box. And when you click on the link, it's going to prompt you to enter a username. And if you would go ahead and do that now, and then you can respond to the prompt in the question.
Another option you can do is you can text Hope Dairy 658 to the number 22333, and that will also be a way for you to respond to the poll.
And I'm going to try the text.
And I believe it is case sensitive, so try to keep everything capital.
Okay, let's see. Some experience. Are you able to see my response?
Yes.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about some of our experiences and the ways that we have worked together to help our students grow.
All right, so this is good. We have some experience. That means that not everyone is brand spanking new to working with ESL kids. It can be daunting, but encouraging that you have some experience. So we're gonna move on to the next item, which is an answer garden. And you can click this link that will take you to another website where you can enter a strategy that you have used when working with ELL students. And this could be anything. What is the first thing that comes to mind, or what is something that you learned in a BT course or from your coach that you could implement with this type of student?
Okay, I entered in a couple pieces of information for strategies that I used when I was in the classroom.
Okay.
Are you able to see the answer garden?
Yes, Ms. Smith, are you able to see these?
Yes.
there, I see my answers up.
These are awesome, really good strategies. I see images, scaffolding, games, vocabulary games, and sentence frames. As I'm reviewing, looking at the strategies that have been put in the answer guarding, two of the strategies that has been really helpful with Miss Derry and I using with our students is teaching sight words in context. Reviewing those sight words in simple sentences and then having the students to read short sight word sentences. Also using the books in the guided reading, in our guided reading groups, and then being able to build the vocabulary and the meaning of words. So using those words again in sentence and helping them to understand the meaning of the words. Another strategy that's been really helpful this year is using the sentence frames. This also allows the students to practice reading and writing as well. So we're able with that strategy, you know, to focus on more than just one skill, and that has really helped them to be able to independently create their own sentence, and then also helping them to understand the sentence structure with writing as well.
Excellent. Yes. These are all really good strategies. And we're always learning. There's always new strategies that we can try. Um, so moving on. My computer's a little bit slow. I found this meme, teaching the only profession where you steal things from home and bring them to work. I particularly definitely love this because I feel like every teacher who works with any student, whether they're ESL or not, making things visual is so, so important, and having manipulatives and bringing random things into your classroom. And this next meme I thought was funny. If you ever want to know what a teacher's mind feels like, imagine a web browser with 2,879 tabs open all the time. So this can be, you know, any teacher who has a multi-level classroom, right? And you're trying to differentiate and meet every kid's need. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but definitely true. So this slide is just some things to think about. And on this slide, we have some buzzwords, some big words that you might have heard in a prep class or in your school. And so I was just going to open it up to our participants and see if anybody had any of these words, if they stood out to you, if they reminded you of a story or an experience that you've had with a student, or if there's anything that you would like to share.
I'm looking at those. There's so much in those 7, 8 phrases there. And I just remember when I taught ESL students, the prior knowledge stands out to me. I think that just because there's a language barrier doesn't mean that students haven't experienced life or that they're at a certain readiness level in their native language. And sometimes that as teachers, because they can't communicate or articulate their thoughts, we assume that they are lacking in knowledge when it's not. That's not the case. They just struggle with communicating where they're at.
Right, that's true. And wait time is another thing to think about. It takes longer for ESL students to process. Um, Something to really focus on is cultural sensitivity. You know, we have students who come from different backgrounds, from different countries. In Bladen, we have a fairly large Latino population. And there are just some things that we may say or do that doesn't always go with what their culture finds appropriate. and just to be mindful of not only your students, but your students' parents, and what they might view your perspective on something to be. Um, Gaps in education is also a big thing. We have a large migrant education program in Bladen, and a lot of our kids move, and they may have gone to 3 or 4 schools in 1 year and or have gaps in their education. So they might have only got bits and pieces from certain places. So that's something to think about in our instruction. And then prior knowledge. Prior knowledge is so key to really build off of what our students already know, right? So pulling in those funds of knowledge, that experience that they already have, to connect it with the content. All right, Springton, if it's okay with you, I'm going to click this link to a video. This is just a short 55-second video of a principal talking about the importance of content teachers working with ELL, ESL teachers. And I'm going to hit play, so let me know if you can hear it or cannot hear it.
We see our students as having gifts.
Can you hear it okay?
We can hear it.
It's not a detriment to speak another language. It's a gift. Some of these babies are traveling to different countries, having to assimilate in different communities with different family members, different friends and classrooms. That takes a high level of emotional intelligence, which to me is a gift to be able to do successfully. And I don't think we give our second language learners and our immigrant students enough credit for what they have to do as children. Lord knows I couldn't do it as an adult. So our staff sees these gifts in our students, not just the academic gifts, but the emotional talents. And we try to really reach out and find those gifts and talents. And I'm very proud. One of the things that we do at Miniville is we have a very high number of students found eligible and brought up for eligibility for gifted. And I think that's a place that we want to be. And it just takes a change in perspective of how you see these students. It's not they're not academic challenged, but these are students of promise. We just have to make sure that we're actively seeing that.
Yeah, so any reflection, any thoughts about that short video that anyone would like to share, Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Barrington?
I think it's a great reflection of with gifts. Even sometimes in the classroom, we have had an opportunity to share hello in English, and then hello, hola in Spanish, and it opens up the door for embracing that diversity and them communicating.
Yeah, and that really triggered something in me that I've never even really thought about. Being a teacher, we're so focused on the instructional piece, but then there's this level of, I'm going to call it emotional intelligence, that these ESL students bring. I mean, come bouncing around from different cultures and different languages, and their trip here, the acclimating into this new society. And so, like the principal said, in some ways they're even more emotionally intelligent than some adults in that regard. So that was a great point that I heard.
All right, I'm going to move on to our next slide. Just to talk about some successful strategies. Mrs. Smith, would you like to share?
So as we begin with this slide here, looking at the parent-teacher meetings and Classdojo, this year for us working together, being flexible with our parent meetings has been an important key factor for success with our students. Scheduling those parent conferences, we've all worked together to make sure that our support staff has been available for parent conferences. Ms. Derry was always available this year during parent conferences when I needed her there to translate so that we could communicate effectively with our parents, and we could list the student glows and the student grows. Our teacher meetings, Miss Derry and I would also meet at least once a week. Sometimes it was a little more, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And we would just share strategies that I was using in the classroom with students, the strategies that she was using in the classroom with students. And then we would discuss it. We would reflect on it to see what's working, what's not working, reviewing that data and the observations from us observing and the goals to see if we were meeting and reaching those goals, and if not, to set different ones. And so we sort of planned together for the following weeks, and if we were going to use new strategies. And then we would come back at the end of the week and reflect on that. And I think that was one of the success factors for us, showing so much growth with students this year. And then Classdojo, the WhatsApp and Talking Points, those are all free apps that are available to communicate with our parents and guardians. And these apps allow for the messages to be translated. And so even when we were in the regular classroom setting this year, these were ways to communicate with parents. And also when we went to remote learning, we continued to use these. I'd use Classdojo a lot. I went through and made sure that my parents were connected. And on Classdojo, I'm able to see, if my parents that are getting the messages, if they're being translated or not. And Miss Derry, I think the WhatsApp is most you use. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And so these, just that communication and that parent support is also a key factor in helping our students be successful. And so when we move down, I'm just going to share just a little bit with like student A. Student A this year was a student that was below grade level expectations in reading and needing some additional support in math at the beginning of the year. And when COVID caused us to go to remote learning, when I go back and I look at our data, student A at that time was above grade level expectations in iStation and on grade level in math. And when we reflect and look at the success with student B was below grade level expectations in reading and in math at the beginning of the year. And then when COVID caused us to go to remote learning on March the 13th, student B was, when we go back and look at the data with iStation, student B was 1 point from being on grade level in reading with iStation, and was making steady progress in math. And so when we think about the success stories with our students in the classroom, I stop and ask myself, okay, with working with support staff and Miss Derry and I working together, how did we work on closing the gap? And what did we do to help our students grow? And so, in iStation, using that data to drive instruction, whether it was in the whole group setting, the small group setting, one-on-one instruction, and using resources that are available in iStation and other resources to help with like listening comprehension, vocabulary, letter knowledge, phonemic awareness, any resources that I made or activities that I made during the week when Miss Derry and I would meet and discuss and reflect on what's working and not, and what maybe, changes we needed to make. I always opened my resources up. And so there were times that, she would take some of the activities and the resources that I had created to her classroom and work with the students one-on-one. And So we shared that information and those things with each other. And we also reviewing the weekly assessments at the end of the week to see if the students were showing growth on the skills being taught. Especially like sight words, us reviewing sight words and coming up with new strategies to use. And with that being said, that's where we sort of kind of made some decisions, with making modifications to the assignments, modifying those assignments based on our observations, based on the strategies we were using, and on the students' assessment at the end of the week. And once we done some modifications, we started to see student success to continue there. Another example is modifying like the sight word list, going back to know those key sight words, that are a must have, and like writing. I use a bubble map when writing and incorporating those sight words in the sentence writing. And so my student 3 sentences using the bubble map. For modifying that assignment, I may require, just 2 sentences instead of the 3. And this year, I always included a bonus word on the sight word test in kindergarten, but my bonus word was always a word from last week's sight words. And so it sort of kind of, it built their confidence as well. Because for the most part, most of them, that word was, automatic given of them being successful instead of me using a word that was going to be on next week's. And then modifying the work at home. When meeting with parents and discussing areas that students needed to work on and show growth, modifying that work for them was so important for them not to be feeling overwhelmed. And when you think about that, we go back to slide 6, things to think about. And one of the things that are on slide 6, is like the economic barriers and that parent support. And so that was a big takeaway that we had when we go back to reflect on, how we've been able to help our students be successful. And then we have at C, we have newsletters and other information. So Ms. Derry and I would speak at the end of the week, and the newsletter going out for the following week. We sent that, all that information would go home translated. So it would go home in English and Spanish. And Ms. Derry would call at the beginning of the week on Monday to review the newsletter with our parents, providing that extra support, knowing what the students were going to be working on during the week and reviewing their homework assignments for the week. And that was very helpful as well. And once again, I always continued to just send those messages out on Dojo, knowing that if Ms. Derry wasn't on campus, sending those messages out, they were still available for our parents. And then we talk about in-person versus remote learning. Ms. Derry and I communicated each week in person at school, and we still continue to communicate remote when we went to remote learning each week. Every week I called to check on all of my students. And so I would reach out to Ms. Derry to check on students. Ms. Derry would check on students, and she would respond back to me if there was any questions or concerns. We would reflect on it and talk about it. Also, I found that a big success in remote learning was modifying the learning packets that were sent home. We even tried to set up like a Google Meet to help support students that were needing additional support. But when we go back to slide 6 and we think about those things to think about, the economic barriers, and then parenting schedules and work. And so that's where, flexibility come in. We had even agreed to do a meet from like 6:30 to 7:30 to help. But we weren't able to do it due to technology, devices, and internet connection. So went back and modified the learning packets, and that really helped. It helped the students to still be able to work on those skills that they needed to continue to work on, and then it helped at home as well. And then communication and the flexibility. Miss Derry and I each week talking. We feel like our communication and flexibility was a key factor in success for our students. Taking that time as educators to go back and reflect on our teaching, researching, planning, and working together and sharing the strategies. It's so important to reach out and work closely with our support staff because it's important for us to support all of our students so that all of our students have the opportunity to be successful and grow. And just being willing to communicate with our parents and to share their strengths and their areas of growth are just all important strategies with helping our students to be successful. Miss Derry, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I think you did an excellent job going through all of that. ESL teachers are helping students master the content area through language, right? So we're not necessarily teaching the content. And it warms my heart when I hear Mrs. Smith say, like, we have to work together. We have to help our kids succeed, to figure out what it is, how we can change, what strategy. And it really is a puzzle. It really is trying to fit those pieces together to figure out what works with those students, and communicate with your parents. Parents really want to try to figure out how to help their kid at home, especially during this remote learning time. So yes, thank you for sharing all of that. It also is super encouraging to any teachers to see growth and to reflect on not only their growth, but your growth as a teacher.
Ms. Smith, when you said you modified the packets that were going home, how specifically did you modify them?
Okay, so when going back and looking at our weekly work, and with that, collaborating with my team that I worked with. So an example would be reading comprehension passages. We sent home a reading comprehension passage for each day of the week, and so on the reading comprehension passage, students were asked, to read that passage 3 times and then complete the comprehension questions attached. So with sending 5 home, modifying that would be like completing 3 of the 5, and then the student having choice of which 3 to complete out of the 5. Another example would be with some of the math work. For an example, if there was, just say, for instance, 12 problems, pick 6 of the problems and complete those problems, those kinds of things.
Gotcha. Okay. So that really just makes the workload less intimidating, and it sort of chunks it down into more manageable, I guess, sessions that they can sit down and actually accomplish. And that, I think, and that goes with all grade levels all the way up into high school, these big projects and these big assignments, and it's just so overwhelming, and to the students, they don't even know where to start. And so just being mindful of that, that's a great strategy. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, ma'am.
My computer is frozen, but here we go. So these are just some resources to share out that you can access and check out. The first two were put together by NCDPI. There were 2 webinars that I sat in on. The one on scaffolding is wonderful. Gives you a lot of different strategies to implement in the classroom. This third one is resources for ESLs during remote learning when they don't have technology. They might not have access to internet. Good things to think about. And then this final one is my favorite. If you've heard of the Cult of Pedagogy, she is a podcast writer, and this website has a million resources and strategies for you to implement in the classroom. Making it visual, building in more group work, communicating with the ESL teacher, honoring the silent period. One of the examples she uses is a science ESL class where the student doesn't really have the language skills to explain the water cycle. So she has them draw the water cycle. So that would be one way to kind of change what your course requirement is to see how they're mastering the content. So these are just some great resources that I would strongly encourage you to check out when you have time. You can't read enough on this stuff, and every student is different. So I'm not sure we have too much time left, but if anyone has any questions.
Well, I did put the links in the chat box for the resources. They didn't come up as links, so you may have to like cut them and paste them into a Word document or something, and then they'll all be functioning links. And I just want to really quickly go back. Ms. Smith said something about this, and you said something about this. And as a classroom teacher, I just remember this was a fantastic strategy that works again in all content areas, all grade levels. You, Ms. Smith, is kindergarten, I was high school. But she talked about when you talk about scaffolding and you're going back and you're reviewing, and she said that she would use one of her old words for the new word as a bonus question. And I just can't say enough that when you, let's say you're giving a test or a quiz, and you know that most of the kids got a lot of question number 7 right. So teachers would tend to not go over question 7 because everyone got it right. And that to me is, they only go over the ones that the kids mostly miss or get wrong. And so what that does is it takes away that confidence. And I think that it's so important that if it was important enough for you to give them that item as an assessment item, if they all got it right, you should still go over, because then you hear all the cheers and the yays in the room. And they're like, yeah, I knew that. See, I knew that. I knew that. And it just really builds the morale that when you go on to the next question and when everyone did not get that one right, there's a little bit of momentum to carry that through. And so I just think that that's a great strategy. I think it's important to really just because they know it, don't dismiss it and never see it again. Bring back that knowledge that they do know, because that's really what motivates them and lifts them to get through some of those more challenging times. Mr. Jackson, is there anything that you would like to add to our conversation?
I'm all right. I just appreciate you letting me jump on, and yeah.
Well, thank you for being here with us today.
Absolutely.
So if that is it and we don't have any more questions, we will wrap this up. I'm going to finish the recording, and we will see you all back into the main room. We will have a panel discussion, and we'll give away a few more door prizes, and don't forget to tweet out with our hashtag Learn Grow Lead 20. So, all right, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.